Welcome back to the library. In this video, we're telling the story of one of World of Warcraft's most iconic zones, the Tirisfal Glades. On the northern coast of Lordaeron, in the Eastern Kingdoms, we find this forsaken zone. Known for its detailed lore and rich Warcraft history, this iconic area serves as the starting point for the Forsaken adventurers entering into the world. But its story goes far beyond that. These glades are home to some of the very best lore in the World of Warcraft. From the titanic battles that gave the land its name, the rise and fall of humanity, to the infamous scourging of the region and the fierce battles between the Horde and the Alliance for control of what they believe is rightfully theirs. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the entire history of the Tirisfal Glades. The story of the Tirisfal Glades goes way back to the Titanic era. Now, most of us know the basics of that story, so I'll spare you the details and hit you with the highlights. A relevant background lore speedrun, so to speak. Azeroth, discovered by the Titans, had a big problem. The old gods. Void entities determined to corrupt the planet's world soul. The Titans responded by creating an army of Titan-forged beings, including the Keepers, and together they crushed the Old Gods' Black Empire. The Old Gods' survivors, like the formidable Yogg-Saron, were locked away in prisons like the complex of Ulduar in the north of ancient Kalimdor. So far, so good. But now comes the plot twist. One of the Keepers, Loken, fell victim to Yogg-Saron's mind games. He betrayed his fellow Keepers, and his actions unleashed the infamous Curse of Flesh, turning the once immortal Titan-forged races into mortal beings of flesh and blood. Two of the Keepers, Tyr and Arcadus, foresaw his betrayal, and alongside Ionia and a group of Titan-forged allies, they fled Ulduar, seeking safety from Loken's grasp. Tyr and his allies didn't leave empty-handed though. They carried with them the Discs of Norgannon, ancient artifacts that recorded the history of Azeroth. Their mission was to uncover the full extent of Loken's treachery and protect the knowledge contained within the Discs. Upon discovering the theft of the Discs of Norgannon, Loken unleashed monstrous horrors known as the Cathraxi, and they were sent to pursue Tyr and his companions. These ancient, terrifying generals of the Old Gods, Zakaj and Kithix, tracked the group relentlessly. When the Cathraxi generals finally caught up to Tyr's party, they had reached the glades in the northeastern reaches of ancient Kalimdor. What followed was a titanic battle that raged for 6 grueling days. Arcane and shadow magic tore through the landscape, transforming the once peaceful glade into a war-torn battlefield. As the conflict reached its peak, Tyr made a fateful decision. To protect his comrades and ensure their escape with the Discs, he unleashed the full extent of his immense power in a final, self-sacrificial act.
So, if by the destruction of this body, you are purged from this world, so be it.
The resulting explosion of energy was devastating, killing one of the Cathraxi outright and forcing the other, now gravely wounded, to flee westward. In honour of her fallen comrade, Ionia named the glade surrounding the massive crater Tyr's Fall, which in the Vrykul tongue translated into Tirisfal. Alongside her followers, she buried both Tyr and his defeated foe in a tomb where they had fallen. As a tribute to Tyr's noble sacrifice, they placed his massive silver hand atop his final resting place, a lasting symbol of his bravery and selflessness. The peaceful Vrykul, who accompanied the Keepers, sought to further honour Tyr's sacrifice by settling near the battlefield to protect the tomb of Tyr. This group of Vrykul established an elite order known as Tyr's Guard. The sole mission of this order was to safeguard the tomb of their fallen leader, ensuring that it remained undisturbed for the rest of time. This area became a place of great significance and legend for the Vrykul people. However, our focus now shifts to the Dragonflayer clan of Vrykul in the north. Around 15,000 years ago, the clan began suffering the effects of the Curse of Flesh. Vrykul women gave birth to small, malformed children. Their ruthless king, Yimmeron, in his fury, he ordered that these weak and deformed children must be killed. But not all Dragonflayer Vrykul could bring themselves to carry out such a cruel order. Instead, some of them chose to defy their king and sought out the legendary land of Tirisfal. entrusting their children to the Vrykul living there instead. In the ages that followed, these children and their descendants underwent further transformation, slowly evolving into a new race that came to be known as the humans. Over the course of the next several thousand years, the Vrykul gradually died out, and the humans developed independently as monumental events unfolded elsewhere across Azeroth. One of the most significant events occurred 10,000 years ago, when the ancient supercontinent of Kalimdor was shattered in a world-altering event known as the Great Sundering. This devastating rupture was the culmination of the War of the Ancients. The Well of Eternity imploded, triggering a catastrophic explosion that shattered ancient Kalimdor into the continents and oceans of modern Azeroth. With the rise of Druidism amongst the Night Elves, arcane magic was outlawed, as its previous misuse had nearly destroyed the world, and anyone who violated this law would face death. Among the surviving highborn loyalists of Queen Azshara, defiance grew. Led by Dathramar Sunstrider, they rejected the ban of arcane magic, viewing it as their birthright. When stern warnings from the Druids went unheeded, Dathramar retaliated with a magical storm over Ashenvale. Unwilling to execute so many kin, the Druids chose to exile them instead. The Highborn, eager to reclaim their freedom, departed on ships, hoping for a land where they could embrace arcane magic without restraint. The Highborn eventually reached the Eastern Kingdoms. Over time, they became the High Elves. Seeking a home rich in ley lines, they settled briefly in the Tirisfal Glades, but soon abandoned it after succumbing to madness from a malevolent force beneath the land. They eventually moved from the Tirisfal Glades and settled in the northern reaches of the Sundered Continent, where they began constructing a new kingdom, Quel'Thalas. With the Elves gone, the primitive human tribes expanded across the region, but this growth brought frequent conflicts between the human tribes over land, religion, and resources. But these internal wars ceased when the tribes united to face a common enemy. The Amani, an ancient and powerful troll race, controlled much of Lordaeron, including the hinterlands, Tirisfal Glades, and Eastweald, which is now the Plaguelands. Tensions escalated as human tribes encroached on Amani territory, leading to inevitable clashes. At this point in history, several human tribes were scattered across the land, but three rose to prominence: the Arathi, the Alterachi, and the Tirisfal tribes. Warlord Thoradin of the Arathi tribe recognized that unity was humanity's only hope against the trolls. Declaring himself king, Thoradin launched a 6-year campaign to unite the tribes, forging alliances through marriage, offering peace and equality, and granting tribal leaders roles as generals in his army. One of his greatest challenges came from the Alterachi tribe in the rugged Alterac Mountains. Thoradin avoided heavy losses by defeating their leader, Igneus, in single combat, winning the Alterachi's loyalty. In the Tirisfal Glades, Thoradin faced the deeply spiritual tribes led by Lordaeron. To earn their trust, he undertook a sacred pilgrimage to their holy sites, pledging to honour their mystical traditions. Inspired by his sincerity, Lordaeron and his people joined his cause. With the tribes united, Thoradin founded the nation of Arathor and established its capital, Strom, in the Arathi Highlands. Now, the background lore to the Troll Wars is important for the story of the Tirisfal Glades, but the actual war isn't that important. And if you want to find out what happens next, there's plenty of Troll War lore in our dedicated Arathi video. The Troll Wars ended in a decisive victory for the united forces of Arathor and the High Elves of Quel'Thalas. Defeated, the Amani retreated into the hills, their power broken for millennia. After the Troll Wars, the king of Arathor, Thoradin, abdicated his throne to embark on his own journey of enlightenment. Driven by a desire to uncover humanity's origins and its ties to the Iron Vrykul, his quest led him to the ancient lands of Tirisfal. There, Thoradin delved into the region's legends and ruins, becoming captivated by the mysteries surrounding Tyr's tomb. When Thoradin arrived at the tomb, he was met by Tyr's guard, the ancient Vrykul order, now led by a secretive group of humans. They firmly refused to let him disturb the sacred site. A tense standoff ensued, but Thoradin's determination prevailed, forcing his way inside. But by doing so, they unknowingly awakened the monstrous Cathrax, Zakaj, buried alongside Tyr. He stood his ground as his comrades fell around him. In a final act of heroism, Thoradin drove his legendary blade, Stromkar, into Zakaj's skull, halting its regeneration and forcing it into an unnatural slumber. But this victory came at a price. The battle left Thoradin mortally wounded, and the former King of Arathor succumbed to his injuries.
At last, the nightmare is over.
Tyr's guard, shaken by the events, vowed never to enter the tomb again, fearing that any further disturbance could awaken the ancient evil and unleash untold devastation upon the world. In the years following the Troll Wars, the Kingdom of Arathor continued to expand, giving rise to several key human settlements in Alterac, Dalaran, Gilneas, Kultiras, and notably the Tirisfal Glades. The Tirisfal Glades have become one of the most popular human regions, renowned for its fertile lands. Many former soldiers chose to settle there, creating a thriving community. Over time, the area was renamed to Lordaeron, a tribute to the late General Lordaeron, whose legacy continued to inspire the people. Around 2,680 years ago, the city-state of Dalaran was founded north of Strom. Many people flocked to Dalaran, seeking freedom to explore their magical potential. Using their powers, they constructed the city's enchanted spires, building a prosperous economy around their growing mastery of the arcane. However, just like what happened with the Night Elves 10,000 years ago, their unchecked use of magic began to weaken the fabric of reality, unknowingly attracting demons from the Burning Legion back to the world. The Magocrats, I think that's a word, sought aid from the High Elves of Quel'Thalos. The Elves, upon investigating the disturbances, confirmed that the misuse of magic had indeed weakened the barriers between Azeroth and the Legion. To address the danger, the Elves and the leaders of Dalaran formed a secret alliance known as the Council of Tirisfal, and 70 years later the Dreadlord Cathrinatia infiltrated Dalaran, spreading plagues and chaos while corrupting the civilians with the cursed blade, Apocalypse. Cathrinatia's reign of terror ended when Aladai, the first guardian of Tirisfal, confronted and banished the Dreadlord from Azeroth. This event marked the first successful banishment of a demon by a guardian. For the next 1,400 years, humans continued to dominate the lands of continental Lordaeron. However, over time, the lands surrounding the capital city of Strom became increasingly problematic. The soil in the region was just too barren to sustain the growing empire. Ultimately, the Lords of Strom, driven by aspirations of purity and enlightenment, decided to leave the historic city. Far to the north, the Lords of Strom arrived in the Tirisfal Glades, where they found scattered human settlements. Over time, they extended their influence, offered their wealth, and transformed the humble villages of the Tirisfal Glades into the grand city of Lordaeron. The city's name, of course, inspired by the land on which it was built. The city of Lordaeron experienced rapid expansion due to two primary factors. The city began as an industrial hub, supplying the growing population with essential goods to sustain their outer settlements. The second reason was its role as a prominent destination for religious pilgrimage. Lordaeron became a sanctuary for the deeply devout who upheld the teachings of the light. These two pillars, industry and religion, fueled Lordaeron's rise into a mighty kingdom. Over time, though, the city's industrial responsibilities were delegated to other emerging settlements, such as the newly established cities of Stratholme and Andahor. With its industrial role diminished, the city of Lordaeron transformed into a centre of religion and administration. Despite its breathtaking beauty, the city's walls were a testament to formidable engineering and defence, and no enemy dared challenge the kingdom, and it remained unthreatened for an entire millennium. Now, you might not believe it, but everything we've covered so far is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the history of the Tirisfal Glades. As we move into the more modern era of World of Warcraft history, things get even more interesting, starting with the arrival of the Horde. Now, of course, we've already covered the tale of the Orcish Horde's invasion, how they crossed the Dark Portal from their dying world of Draenor into the lands of continental Azeroth. And in just 3 short years, the Horde had succeeded in conquering Stormwind. In the aftermath of the King of Stormwind's death, Sir Anduin Lothar, faced with a kingdom in ruins, led the shattered remnants of Stormwind's army and as many civilians as he could gather away from the fallen city. They retreated across the Great Sea, eventually landing on the shores of Lordaeron. Anduin Lothar arrived at the court of King Terenas Menethil II. This ultimately persuaded the king to summon the 7 human kingdoms for an urgent council. Inside the city walls, the council deliberated for days, with tensions running high until one of Lordaeron's most revered priests, Turellion, delivered a dire warning. He cautioned the kings that their realms would share Stormwind's tragic fate if they failed to stand united. His plea broke the deadlock, and the human leaders voted unanimously to form the Alliance of Lordaeron. The council selected Anduin Lothar to lead the Alliance military efforts. His heritage and lack of political ties to the northern kingdoms made him a neutral and trusted choice to command fairly. With this coalition in place, the kingdoms prepared for the Orcish onslaught they knew was on the horizon. Sir Anduin Lothar recognised the need for a unifying force that transcended the disparate backgrounds of the allied nations. To address this, the Church proposed a groundbreaking solution. Archbishop Alonsus Fowl collaborated closely with Lothar to create a new order of warrior priests, individuals who could inspire and lead on the front lines with both strength and spiritual guidance. In the city of Stratholme, within Alonsus Chapel, the Order of the Silver Hand was founded. 5 of these warrior priests, known as paladins, were appointed to lead this noble order. Uther the Lightbringer, the first to be named, was followed by Dathrahan, Tyrion, Tyrellian, and Gavinrad. The order's name and the emblem were inspired by the legend of the Silver Hand, a legacy of the Keeper Tyr, symbolising light-wielding warriors who placed self-sacrifice above all else. Confident in their plans, Warchief Doomhammer anticipated striking Lordaeron before the newly formed alliance could mount an effective defence. His primary target, Lordaeron's capital city. He believed that if the heart of the alliance fell, the coalition of nations would collapse. Doomhammer's forces advanced toward the Alterac Mountains. The Alliance and the Horde soon clashed in the Battle of Hillsbrad Foothills. However, fortune favoured the Horde when King Aedan Perinold of the Alterac Kingdom approached the Orcs with an offer. Perinold had been hesitant to confront the Horde, believing them an unstoppable force even for an united alliance. The sight of Orcish Death Knights, Ogre Mages and Dragons at his borders convinced him to wave the white flag, offering Doomhammer safe passage through the mountains in exchange for the promise that Alterac would be spared. The Horde quickly bypassed the Alliance mountain defences, advancing swiftly toward the Tirisfal Glades and the capital city. Upon reaching the area, Doomhammer ordered an immediate siege. While the Alliance had anticipated an eventual assault on the capital city, the speed of the Horde's advance caught them off guard. Doomhammer was confident that the city would fall once Horde reinforcements arrived from the front line in Quel'Thalas. However, delays from Horde clans in the north left behind in Silvermoon cast a shadow over the Horde's plans. Worst still, Tyrellian's army arrived from the east, forcing Doomhammer to redirect resources from the siege. The situation grew dire. Without reinforcements from the absent Orc clans, the Horde lacked the strength to storm the city. Eventually, the Dragonmaw clan arrived alone, bringing devastating news. The famous Orc warlock Gul'dan had betrayed the Horde, taking the Stormreaver and the Twilight's Hammer clans with him to pursue his own ambitions. As if that weren't enough, Doomhammer learned that King Perinold's treachery had been uncovered. Troops from Stromgarde, led by King Thoros Trollbane, had seized Alterac and its mountain passes, cutting off the Horde's retreat and leaving Doomhammer's army in Tirisfal completely isolated. Realising the campaign was lost, Doomhammer gave the order for a full retreat to Khazmodan. And so, the Horde was driven back, retreating all the way to the Dark Portal. Some of the surviving Orcs, those who weren't captured, fled through the portal, returning to their dying world of Draenor. At Tyrellian's command, Khadgar unleashed his immense power to destroy the portal, sealing the connection between the two worlds. And in the 7th year after the Orcish invasion, the Second War was over, and the Horde had been defeated. Yet this brutal conflict would not mark the end of the trials that the forests of the Tirisfal Glades would face in the years to come. In the aftermath of the war with the Orcs, the Tirisfal Glades surrounding the kingdom flourished as a serene land of peaceful farms and quiet villages. But as the kingdom regained its strength, ancient forces stirred in the shadows. On Draenor, Ner'zhul, elder shaman of the Shadowmoon clan and warchief of the Horde of Draenor, devised another desperate plan to escape their doomed world. He sought out powerful artifacts from Azeroth, all of which he would use to open portals to new worlds. When Ner'zhul obtained the Skull of Gul'dan, its dark power corrupted him, driving him to focus on his own survival and strength while abandoning the Horde. His recklessness led him through the portals he had created, but instead of freedom, he was intercepted by Kil'jaeden, the demon lord responsible for the Orcs' original corruption. Kil'jaeden, furious at Ner'zhul's failures, sentenced him to a fate far worse than death. The demon commanded his Dreadlord servants, Tichondrius, Mal'Ganis, Balnazar, Deatharok, and Varimathras, to torture and torment Ner'zhul relentlessly. Broken by their cruelty, the shaman finally begged for release. Kil'jaeden answered, but not with mercy. Ner'zhul's mortal form was destroyed, his soul ripped from his body. Kil'jaeden bound Ner'zhul's tormented spirit into 2 items, a suit of enchanted armour and the cursed runeblade Frostmourne. He then encased it in a diamond-hard block of ice and hurled into the ice-crowned glacier as the Lich King.
My fate is torment, but I will not bear this crown alone.
It was there the Lich King was tasked with carrying out Kil'jaeden's dark will to unleash a plague of undeath upon Azeroth. The victims of this plague would rise as mindless undead, eternally enslaved to the Lich King's will, spreading destruction and paving the way for the Burning Legion's return. Imprisoned within the Frozen Throne, Ner'zhul expanded his mastery over the plague of undeath. When the time was right, he sent a chilling mental call across Azeroth. Among those who answered the summons was Kel'Thuzad. After months of grueling travel, he arrived at the icy glacier of Icecrown. Kel'Thuzad knelt before the Frozen Throne and pledged his soul to the Lich King. Kel'Thuzad's first mission was to return to the lands of men in Lordaeron and establish a dark religion devoted to the Lich King. Returning in his disguise, he built a following, establishing the cult of the Damned. In the village of Brill, within the Tirisfal Glades, Kel'Thuzad conducted his first experiments with the plague of undeath. The town of Brill became one of the earliest places afflicted, and its inhabitants quickly succumbed to the plague and rose again as undead under the Lich King's control. The plague's success in Brill convinced Kel'Thuzad to urge the Lich King to hasten the invasion. As the plague spread across the northern lands and the Tirisfal Glades, it transformed the dead into feral zombies, rapidly swelling the ranks of the Lich King's army. Kel'Thuzad, witnessing the growing horde, named this terrifying force the Scourge, a relentless army that would soon bring devastation to the city of Lordaeron and beyond. Now, this is probably the moment you've all been waiting for, the introduction of arguably the greatest character in World of Warcraft history, Arthas Menethil. Son of King Terenas Menethil II, Arthas was the crown prince with a bright future, already proving himself as a mighty paladin. Arthas first demonstrated his leadership in the southern town of Strahmbrad, where he and Uther were sent to defend the settlement from Orcish raiders. These orcs had broken free from their internment camps, posing a renewed threat. But as Arthas concentrated on the orcs, grim rumours started to spread of a strange and horrifying plague sweeping through the Northlands. Orders from the king soon arrived, and Arthas was sent north to investigate the outbreak. There, he discovered the village in ruins, its inhabitants transformed into undead servants of the Lich King, and together they fought against the undead infestation at a granary. It was there they encountered Kel'Thuzad himself, the necromancer spreading the plague of undeath. Kel'Thuzad soon fled, but with Arthas and his companions in pursuit. By the time they caught up to him in Anderhall, the main agricultural distribution point for the region, the damage was already done. The grain they stored there had been tainted and distributed to outlying villages. Before Arthas struck him down, Kel'Thuzad revealed the name of the Scourge's leader, Mal'Ganis, a Nathrezim demon orchestrating the plague. What followed is a tale that changed the course of Azeroth's history forever. Arthas defied the Order of the Silver Hand and initiated the infamous culling of Stratholme.
This entire city must be purged.
Within Stratholme, Arthas confronted Mal'Ganis, who was already working to claim the souls of the infected. Though Arthas sought to destroy the Dreadlord in a final confrontation, Mal'Ganis retreated, taunting the prince and vowing to meet him in Northrend. Arthas pursued the demon to Northrend. There he reunited with an old friend, Muradin Bronzebeard, brother of the Dwarven king Magni. Muradin led Arthas to a legendary weapon that could turn the tide against the Scourge, a blade called Frostmourne. Unbeknownst to Arthas though, Frostmourne was cursed and bound to the Lich King's will. Believing the sword would save his people, Arthas claimed it, despite Muradin's warnings, and the prince's soul was consumed by the blade's dark power. Arthas, now transformed into the first and mightiest of the Lich King's Death Knights, with his soul lost and his mind shattered, he returned to the city of Lordaeron, not as its saviour though, but as its doom. Arthas began his campaign of destruction with an unthinkable act, the murder of his own father. With his newfound unholy strength, he crushed the capital city of Lordaeron, leaving it in ruins. With the king dead and the capital city fallen, the Scourge swept across the Tirisfal Glades, leaving devastation in its wake. As Lordaeron crumbled, Arthas returned to the desolate Balnir farmstead in eastern Tirisfal Glades, where he committed a grim act, raising his once beloved steed Invincible from the grave as a skeletal mount. And with that final act, Lordaeron had fallen. The once thriving settlements and villages of the Tirisfal Glades had been obliterated, replaced by a landscape of death and decay. With Lordaeron in ruins, Arthas turned his gaze northward to Quel'Thalas. Now one of Arthas's most loyal servants, Kel'Thuzad informed the Death Knight that only the mystical font of elven power, the Sunwell, could restore him to his corporeal form. With this goal in mind, Arthas led his massive undead army toward the heart of the High Elven homeland. Now you're probably thinking this is the entire history of the Tirisfal Glades, not Quel'Thalas, but we're about to introduce one of the most important characters in the history of the Tirisfal Glades. Standing between Arthas and his goal were the Farstriders, the elite rangers sworn to protect Quel'Thalas. Their leader, the formidable Sylvanas Windrunner. She rallied her forces to resist the Scourge's relentless advance. Arthas and his army swept through the elven lands until they finally confronted Sylvanas east of Fairbreeze village, not far from Silvermoon. In a desperate final stand, Sylvanas herself engaged with Arthas in combat. Though she fought valiantly, her strength was no match for the dark power of Frostmourne. The cursed blade shattered her weapons, struck her down, and pierced through her abdomen. As she lay dying, Sylvanas demanded that Arthas give her a clean death, but the Death Knight, still bitter from the fierce resistance she had shown, refused her request. As Sylvanas slipped into darkness, she felt an unimaginable agony as her soul was forcibly ripped back into the world. Arthas, in a moment of supreme cruelty, transformed the Ranger General into an undead Banshee. Sylvanas was granted horrific abilities that she never possessed in life. Though bound completely to Arthas's will, she retained her self-awareness, a deliberate torment engineered by Arthas so she could witness the destruction she would bring to her own people. Now a twisted shadow of her former self, Sylvanas became both a weapon of the Scourge and a prisoner of its malice. So next up, we're going to talk about the Lich King's crack. After the Third War, the Lich King's power began to wane. When the Lich King forced the cursed blade of Frostmourne out of the ice at the Frozen Throne, it caused a crack to form. The damage was then worsened when Illidan Stormrage attempted to destroy the Frozen Throne with a powerful spell. This crack allowed the Lich King's power to slowly leak away, gradually weakening him over time. As Ner'zhul faltered, so did Arthas Menethil. As the Lich King's strength diminished, cracks began to form in his control over the minds of his undead minions. Sylvanas, along with several Banshees, began to regain fragments of their own free will. She kept this revelation secret from both Arthas and Kel'Thuzad, outwardly continuing to serve while secretly plotting her revenge. Meanwhile, the Dreadlords, sensing the Lich King's growing weakness, invited Sylvanas to a meeting. There they revealed the cause of Ner'zhul's decline and shared their plans to overthrow Arthas and seize control of Lordaeron for themselves. Sylvanas agreed to collaborate, but insisted that her involvement would be on her own terms. The Dreadlords devised a plan to ambush Arthas within the capital city, but anticipating the possibility of his escape, Sylvanas prepared her own contingency. Her loyal Banshees would escort Arthas to a secluded location in the forest under the guise of aiding him. After surviving the Dreadlords' ambush and fleeing the city, Arthas was led by Sylvanas' sisters to an arranged meeting point. There, the Banshees turned on him, killing his bodyguards and leaving him vulnerable. Hidden in the shadows, Sylvanas struck, firing a venomous arrow she had specially crafted to paralyze Arthas. Furious at her betrayal, Arthas demanded she end his life, but Sylvanas refused to grant him the mercy of a quick death. However, before she could strike, Kel'Thuzad arrived with reinforcements of Scourge forces, forcing Sylvanas and her Banshees to flee. Despite her failure, she vowed to continue her pursuit of Arthas and bring him to justice for all he had done. After the scourging of Lordaeron, Arthas departed for Northrend at the Lich King's summons, and Kel'Thuzad went into hiding. It was at this point that Sylvanas and her Banshees had completely broken free of Ner'zhul's control.
You seem troubled, mistress.
Aren't you, sister? Only days ago we were the Lich King's slaves. We existed only to slaughter in his name. And now, We are free.
Sylvanas' uneasy freedom was interrupted when the Dreadlord, Varimathras, approached her with an offer to join him and his brothers in their bid to rule the Plague Lands. Refusing to relinquish her hard-won freedom, Sylvanas declined. Varimathras warned her that those who did not align with the new rulers would be cast aside. Seeing this as a threat from the Dreadlords, Sylvanas began preparing for inevitable attack. With only her banshees and a handful of lesser undead, she set out to build an army. Bolstered by her new undead allies, Sylvanas quickly defeated Varimathras. The Dreadlord pathetically begged for his life, promising to serve her and revealing critical knowledge about his brothers and their defences. Though wary of his treachery, Sylvanas saw his value and accepted his submission. Sylvanas set her sight on reclaiming the fallen capital city of Lordaeron from the Dreadlords who had now taken control. The final obstacle in her path was Balnazzar. Using artifacts left behind from the royal family, she dismantled his demonic forces. To prove his loyalty, Sylvanas commanded Varimathras to kill Balnazzar. Reluctantly, Varimathras agreed, but Balnazzar's death was a deception orchestrated by the Dreadlord brothers. The two faked his death, and Balnazzar lived. He would later resurface as the puppet master manipulating the Scarlet Crusade from the shadows, a story we're coming on to next. With an army of free-willed undead and an abandoned city at her disposal, Sylvanas laid the foundation for her new dominion, proclaiming herself Queen of the Forsaken.
From here on out, we shall be known as the Forsaken. We will find our own path in this world, Dreadlord, and slaughter anyone who stands in our way.
She established a nation for those who had broken free from the Lich King's control. She claimed the Undercity, the vast catacombs beneath the ruins of Lordaeron, as their capital. Under her leadership, the Forsaken transformed the sprawling underground labyrinth into a thriving stronghold. Varimathras informed Sylvanas of Arthas' fate in Northrend, where he had merged with the Lich King. Determined to strike back, Sylvanas turned to her followers for aid. Among them, Putris, a former Scourge who had regained free will, pledged to weaponize the Plague of Undeath for the Forsaken. Impressed by his ambition, Sylvanas appointed him Grand Apothecary and established the Royal Apothecary Society under his leadership. She imposed two conditions on him. The plague must be deadly to both the Scourge and the living, and it must be capable of killing Arthas if the chance arose. To protect his work, Sylvanas swore Putris to secrecy, knowing his experiments would provoke outrage if discovered. She also sought out her former champion, Nathanos Blightcaller. After freeing him from the Lich King's control, Sylvanas restored Nathanos to her side, naming him her champion in the Forsaken's quest for vengeance against the Lich King. Under Sylvanas' leadership, the Forsaken established themselves as a formidable force, driven by their desire for vengeance and the unyielding will of their Banshee Queen. Now, changing gears here, it's impossible to recount the history of the Tirisfal Glades without addressing the metaphorical elephant in the room, the Scarlet Crusade. After the deaths of King Menethil II and Uther the Lightbringer at Arthas' hands, the Crusade's leaders convened in Hearthglen. They debated their path forward, whether to pursue Arthas and exact revenge, or reclaim Lordaeron from the Scourge. Saidan Dathrahan ultimately directed their efforts toward the critical battlefronts of Stratholme and Anderhall to stem the undead epidemic. During an assault on Stratholme, Saidan Dathrahan became separated from his comrades and, unbeknownst to them, was slain and then replaced by the Dreadlord, Balnazzar. When Dathrahan reappeared, no one suspected the truth, and his influence began to reshape the Crusade from within. These remnants of the Silver Hand forged alliances where they could, notably with the communities of Tyr's Hand, while also establishing a forward base in an old monastery near the capital city. As Alexandros Mograine turned his attention toward the Forsaken, Balnazzar, still posing as Saidan Dathrahan, manipulated events to serve his own ends. Fearing Mograine's power and the threat posed by the legendary weapon he carried, the Ashbringer, Balnazzar conspired with his brother Varimathras to eliminate him. Exploiting the son of Alexandros, Reno Mograine, and his desire for recognition, Balnazzar convinced the young knight to betray his father. Reno led Alexandros and High Inquisitor Fairbanks to Stratholme, where they were ambushed by the Scourge. Though Alexandros fought valiantly, slaying countless undead, he ultimately fell. Reno used the Ashbringer to stab his own father in the back. Disillusioned by the Crusade's corruption and deviation from its noble origins, a number of members broke away to form the Argent Dawn, a more inclusive and principled order similar to that of the previous Order of the Silver Hand. Those who remained formally embraced the new name, the Scarlet Crusade, cementing their transformation into a radical sect consumed by their obsession with eradicating the undead at any cost. We've dedicated an entire tale to uncovering the events that transpired within the halls of the Scarlet Monastery, including the chilling story of a Scarlet Crusader who, under the influence of dark forces, was driven to commit the unthinkable, murdering his own family. If you're intrigued, you'll find 2 links to nearly an hour of in-depth Scarlet Crusader lore in the description below. Now, returning to the Forsaken storyline, Sylvanas Windrunner was determined to ensure that the Damned, like herself, had a place to call home. To protect her new nation and advance her goals, she sought allies among the factions of Azeroth. Sylvanas sent emissaries to both the Alliance and the Horde in pursuit of alliances. Excuse the pun. However, the ones she dispatched to the Alliance never returned. On the other hand, the kind-hearted Tauren of Thunderbluff offered a promising opportunity for diplomacy. The Forsaken presented themselves as seeking a cure for their degenerative condition, claiming that the shamanistic powers of the Horde and the life-giving energies of the earth might hold the key to their salvation. In return, they pledged their unwavering support for the Horde's endeavours throughout Lordaeron and Azeroth. In the end, the Tauren's influence persuaded Warchief Thrall to form an alliance with the Forsaken. This pact bolstered the Forsaken's chances in their fight against the Lich King, while the Horde gained a critical foothold in the Eastern Kingdoms, expanding their reach and their influence. After joining the Horde and establishing themselves in the Undercity, the Forsaken began rapidly expanding their influence. Their numbers surged dramatically, and by the 25th year after the Orcish Horde's arrival on Azeroth, their population had exploded. Sylvanas Windrunner, recognising the potential of her growing army of free-willed undead, strategically delegated tasks to strengthen their hold over the Tirisfal Glades. Forsaken adventurers starting their journey in the Tirisfal Glades took on critical tasks to support the greater cause. They were charged with culling the Mindless Ones, undead still under the Lich King's control, who had overrun the small town of Deathnell. In addition to reclaiming Deathnell, the Forsaken were tasked with defending their lands from external threats. They fought back against the Rothhide Gnolls, and of course, the Scarlet Crusaders. At the same time, the Forsaken began developing a new deadly plague to combat the Scourge, but with potential applications against the living as well. This initiative was spearheaded by the Royal Apothecary Society, furthering Sylvanas' ambitions while ensuring the Forsaken's place as a formidable force within the Horde. For the next 2 years, the forests of the Tirisfal Glades remained largely unchanged as the Forsaken steadily bolstered their forces. However, in the 27th year, the Tirisfal Glades would once again become a theatre of war. During the early stages of the Northrend campaign, when the heroes of Azeroth landed on the shores of Northrend to wage war against the Lich King, the Royal Apothecary Society finalised the Forsaken Blight, a devastating plague capable of annihilating both the living and the undead. During the famous battle at Angrathar the Wrathgate, after Dranosh Sourfang fell to the Lich King, Putris appeared atop of a cliff, overlooking the battlefield. Using Forsaken catapults, he unleashed the Blight on the forces below, indiscriminately killing Horde, Alliance, and Scourge alike, and forcing the Lich King to retreat to the Icecrown Citadel. In the aftermath, it was revealed that Putris, alongside several members of the Royal Apothecary Society, had betrayed Sylvanas. They had allied with the Dreadlord Varimathras, who had secretly remained loyal to the Burning Legion and his Nathrazim brothers while pretending to serve the Dark Lady. Together, they orchestrated a coup and seized control of the Undercity. Thrall and Sylvanas planned an immediate counterattack to reclaim the Undercity. During their preparations, Jaina Proudmoore arrived with grim news. In the wake of Bolvar Fourdragon's presumed death at the Wrathgate, King Varian Rin was preparing for war with the Horde. Thrall assured Jaina that the Horde had no intention of provoking conflict and vowed to deliver justice for the betrayal at the Wrathgate. With the message sent, Thrall, Sylvanas and Vol'jin led the Horde forces in a daring assault on the Undercity, where Sylvanas personally struck down the traitorous Dreadlord Varimathras, reclaiming the city for the Horde. While these events unfolded, Jaina had returned to Varian and informed him that the Royal Apothecary Society and Varimathras had betrayed both the Horde and the Alliance, and the Horde were raiding the city. By this time, Varian had already mobilised an assault on the city, determined to bring Putris to justice and reclaim Lordaeron for the Alliance. The Alliance forces tracked Putris to the Apothecarium, where they confronted and defeated him. Tensions between the Alliance and the Horde came to a head when King Varian Rin confronted Thrall and Sylvanas in the Royal Quarter. A fierce battle erupted between the two factions, only to be halted by Lady Jaina Proudmoore, who froze the fighters with her magic and teleported the Alliance forces out. The battle for the Undercity marked the end of the Cold War between the Alliance and the Horde, as Varian then declared open war against the Horde, solidifying the growing divide between the factions. Later that year, the war against the Lich King reached its dramatic conclusion as the heroes of Azeroth, led by the Argent Crusade and Knights of the Ebon Blade, stormed the Ice-Crown Citadel and defeated the Lich King, ending his reign of terror. With the Lich King's defeat, Sylvanas and the Forsaken, once driven by vengeance, found themselves without purpose, turning their focus to a new goal. They sought the complete conquest of Lordaeron. Sylvanas oversaw improvements to the Tirisfal Glades, starting with the transformation of Brill, installing Forsaken architecture and strengthening defences at the Bulwark. The inclusion of former Scourge members, particularly the now free-willed Valkyr, brought a new era for the Forsaken, the ability to raise new members of free-willed Undead, creating a second generation of Forsaken. 2 years later, as the world turned its attention to the mysterious Isle of Pandaria, the fight for control of the Scarlet Monastery neared a critical point. New leaders emerged to helm the Scarlet Crusade, including one survivor of the original leadership, Sally Whitemane, the High Inquisitor. But now we introduce Lillian Voss, a key figure opposing the Scarlet Crusade. She declared that the only way to truly end their threat was to eliminate Whitemane. However, this task required the use of a sacred weapon, the Blades of the Anointed, and they would be used to ensure her permanent defeat, as she would otherwise continually be resurrected. In a decisive move, Lillian joined forces with Horde and Alliance heroes to storm the monastery. Together, they decimated the remaining Scarlet forces and finally defeated Sally Whitemane. However, the Crusade's end was not absolute. 2 years after Whitemane's death, the Scarlet Crusade faced its most formidable challenge yet, the relentless assault of the Knights of the Ebon Blade. During the third invasion of the Burning Legion, the Ebon Blade launched an attack on the Scarlet Monastery as part of their mission to resurrect Sally Whitemane as a member of their new Four Horsemen. With ruthless precision, the Ebon Blade ensured that the Scarlet Crusade was utterly destroyed. As the Scarlet Crusade's reign of terror drew to a close, other forces began to rise in power.
Windrunner, come forward.
Warchief.
The lower spirits say death will claim me soon.
In the end, death claims us all. But the Horde will live on.
I have never trusted you. Nor would I have ever imagined in our darkest time that you would be the one to save us. The spirits have granted me clarity, a vision. They whisper a name. Many will not understand, but you must step out of the shadows and lead. You must be Warchief.
As the Burning Legion launched its third invasion of Azeroth, the devastation was felt across every corner of the world, including the Tirisfal Glades. Travad, a human paladin and leader of the secretive Tyr's Guard since the Third War, sought to protect the legacy of Tyr. He met with a High Lord of the Silver Hand to warn that recent incursions by the Twilight's Hammer had revealed the location of Tyr's tomb, jeopardizing the sacred artifact, the Silver Hand. Travad insisted it must be sealed forever, but only after recovering the hammer. The hero paladin retrieved the silver hand, and the group fled as the tomb began to collapse. As the last surviving member of Tyr's guard, Travad explained that Tyr's body, the tomb's secrets, and Zakaj's prison were now buried beneath tons of stone and water. After the third invasion of Azeroth by the Burning Legion, the world faced a new crisis. When the Dark Titan Sargeras wounded the planet, Azeroth's very lifeblood began seeping to the surface, manifesting as an extraordinary substance known as Azerite. This material, with its immense power, became a catalyst for renewed conflict. Seizing the opportunity, Warchief Sylvanas Windrunner devised a plan to secure Kalimdor and destabilize the Alliance from within, hoping to trigger a political crisis that would lead to its collapse. The Horde's strategy included holding Darnassus hostage, to sow discord among the Alliance and further weaken their unity. While the following war, the War of the Thorns, is a tale for another time, its devastating climax came when Sylvanas ordered the burning of the World Tree, Teldrassil. This act ignited the Fourth War on Azeroth, as the Alliance retaliated with ferocity, marching toward Lordaeron Keep for a decisive confrontation. The Alliance, led by Anduin Wrynn and Genn Greymane, arrived in Tirisfal Glades with the Third Fleet, storming Brill as they advanced south. Horde defenders, including Varrock Saurfang, Bane Bloodhoof, and Lorthaimar Theron, mounted a fierce defence. The Alliance forces pushed the Horde back into the capital city, laying siege to Lordaeron Keep. As the siege seemed to turn in the Alliance's favour, Sylvanas launched a counterattack. In a desperate move, Sylvanas deployed an Azerite war machine to destroy Alliance siege towers. When the machine was neutralised, she resorted to blighting the battlefield, killing both Alliance and Horde troops and raising the dead as soldiers. This ruthless tactic sowed dissent within the Horde, particularly in Saurfang, who became disillusioned with Sylvanas' methods. As the battle reached its peak, Jaina Proudmoore arrived on a flying Kultiran flagship, using frost magic to neutralise the Blight and undead forces. She destroyed part of the keep's walls, allowing the Alliance to storm the city. Reinforcements from Sylvanas' sister, Alleria Windrunner, and Gelbin Mekatork turned the tide, forcing the Horde to retreat further. After being confronted by the Alliance at the keep's entrance, Saurfang surrendered and was taken prisoner. The Alliance leaders eventually confronted Sylvanas in the throne room, and they demanded her surrender. Instead, she declared their victory meaningless, triggering a massive explosion of stored blight that flooded the keep and the surrounding city. As the throne room collapsed, Jaina teleported the Alliance leaders to safety while the Horde escaped aboard a gunship. The battle for Lordaeron left both the capital city and Brill in ruins, with the region overrun by blighted undead. Lordaeron Keep was deemed uninhabitable, and the efforts to reclaim the area faltered. The mighty orc warrior, Varrock Saurfang, deeply disillusioned by Sylvanas' leadership, grew increasingly concerned that her actions were tearing the Horde apart. The burning of Teldrassil had appalled him. Captured during the battle for Lordaeron, Saurfang spent time in the Stormwind Stockade, reflecting on the Horde's future. There, he confided in King Anduin Wrynn, revealing his plans to challenge Sylvanas for the mantle of Warchief and asking for the Alliance's aid in overthrowing her. A temporary truce was called between the Alliance and the Horde, and their combined forces marched on Orgrimmar to end Sylvanas' reign. However, before the battle began, Saurfang issued a personal challenge to Sylvanas, a Mak-Gorah, a duel of honour. Despite Thrall's warnings that he would likely die, Saurfang stood firm. As she armed herself, Saurfang was granted the Dragora by Thrall and Charlemagne by Anduin. After initially gaining the upper hand, Sylvanas was hurt and slashed across the eye. Sylvanas lashed out. With these words, she revealed her true disdain for the faction she had led. Unleashing a blast of devastating magic, Sylvanas struck down Saurfang, killing him instantly. She then abandoned the Horde entirely, leaving Orgrimmar and the faction she had once commanded in turmoil.
Standing as one. Savor it. Nothing lasts.
By the 35th year, Sylvanas Windrunner's story had diverged entirely from the Tirisfal Glades, marking the end of her direct involvement in its history. So, attention turned back to the Tirisfal Glades and the Forsaken, who began reclaiming the ruins of Lordaeron. With Brill successfully retaken and under reconstruction, influential Forsaken figures like Lillian Voss, Kalia Menethil, Deathstalker Commander Belmont, Dark Ranger Velenara, and Master Apothecary Faranel gathered to strategize the next steps in securing the region. Together, they established the new Desolate Council.
All right. What are we going to do about the plague in the Undercity?
The new Desolate Council would go on to figure out how to cleanse the city. And after a victory against a materialized manifestation of the plague, the ruins of Lordaeron were finally liberated from the lingering blight, allowing the Forsaken to reclaim their home and take a significant step towards securing the future.
Are we really going to trust a Menethil on the council?
I cannot escape the shadows of my past, but I have no desire for a throne. My place is here among you, and I vow to serve all our people.
I take you at your words, Lady Menethil. And we, the apothecaries, will help shape our brighter future.
Then it's settled. We are the Desolate Council. We are the Forsaken.
With the capital city finally cleansed after all these years, one might assume the history of the Tirisfal Glades had reached its conclusion. However, there's one more story to revisit. In the 40th year, as both the Horde and the Alliance embarked on their journeys to the Dragon Isles, the Tomb of Tyr saw significant developments once again. After the devastating loss of his order and the securing of the tomb's artifacts, Travad discovered that the structure had not completely collapsed. Resolving to stand vigil as the last of the Tyr's guard, he remained at the site for several years. However, over time, the tomb's defense systems inexplicably locked him out. So, a hero, accompanied by Watcher Koronos, ventured to the Tomb of Tyr in search of Tyr's preserved memories. There they encountered the frustrated Travad. Travad joined their mission, determined to assist them in reactivating the tomb's mechanisms. He hoped these systems would house enough of Tyr's memories to trigger the activation of the Silver Scale, an artifact essential to reconstructing Tyr's new body. Within the main chamber, Travad valiantly defended the group from the tomb's defense systems while guiding them deeper into the ruins. Their journey led to the Dark Walk, an underground, partially collapsed passage that connected the tomb's main chamber to the grave prison of Zakaj. When the first console short-circuited, Travad directed the hero to a secondary console. Using the Silver Scale, the hero activated it, unveiling Tyr's final stand against Zakaj the Corruptor. Witnessing Tyr's ultimate sacrifice reignited Travad's faith. And so, the story of the Tirisfal Glades comes full circle. A land forged in the ancient might of the Vrykul, shaped by the rise and fall of Lordaeron, and forever scarred by the defiance of the Forsaken. This land is not just a graveyard of kingdoms, it is a crucible, where legends are born and where the echoes of sacrifice and struggle linger. Every ruin, every darkened path carry the weight of those who fought for power, freedom, and survival. The Tirisfal Glades is more than a place, it is a legacy of strength and transformation, and its story is far from over.